All right, we are here. We are live. It is Tuesday, and that means it's InDesign Tuesday. So, welcome. If this is your first time, thanks for joining me live today. My name is Terry White, Worldwide Design and Photography Evangelist for Adobe. It's Tuesday, and I normally do, when I can, a stream on InDesign on Tuesdays. So, I have dubbed this, I have christened this InDesign Tuesdays because that's what I do. All right, for those of you who are old timers who've been here for a while, welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at just a simple, quick answering a question of what types of files to use in InDesign and what the advantages of using layered InDesign files would be. So with that said, a few quick shout outs. I know Mark's in the house, Paul's in the house, Colleen, Rachel, Creative Touches, thanks for being here. Kicker, is that Corks? I can't see the last name. Suzanne, thanks for being here. Richard, Valder, Victoria, Eli, Defeer, Lee, Manuel, if I'm saying that correctly. If not, apologize. Cindy, thanks for being here. Tom and Bruce as well. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive into today's topic. It shouldn't take too long. It's a pretty quick, easy one. But let's go ahead and dive in. So I'm going to switch over to the computer. I've got InDesign running as usual. I've also got Photoshop running behind it. And we're going to go ahead and create a new document just so people can see that process every single time. I'm going to use a template just so I don't have to do everything from scratch. I'm just going to use the free business proposal layout. And you get your templates from the various categories of print, web, and mobile. So I believe this is probably a print template. I'm just going to go ahead and double click on it. That will launch it. And of course, a template means that it's got a lot of content already. Well, it's got a lot of elements already there for you to put your own content in. So it says your company, where you would actually put the name of your company or your logo, change the address, put your images in, so forth and so on. I'm going to scroll down a couple pages in this template. I want to get to this page where some things are already pretty much laid out. I'm going to make some changes here in just a moment, but let's go ahead and I'm going to get rid of this frame. I don't need that particular frame because I'm going to bring my own in. And I'm going to go ahead and grab these grouped elements and just move them over. I want them out of my way because I just want to kind of free up this space all the way over here on the right-hand side. All right, now that I got my space cleared out, I want to put something there and I want to put an image in there that I just want to bring it in and use it. So if you're bringing in a photo, you can bring in just about everything except raw files. You can bring in JPEGs, TIFFs, PNG files, GIFs, PSDs. And maybe a couple other formats I'm not thinking of right now, but pretty much everything except, like I said, camera raw files. So that means I can bring in a wide variety of things. Now, one of the types of files I like to bring in when I'm using InDesign is a Photoshop file, especially Photoshop files with layers, because they allow me to do some things that it would just take more steps if I had to do it with a JPEG or TIFF or something else. So for example, let's say I do bring in this JPEG file from my library here. This is a stock file. I'll drag it over. I can go ahead and just drag it in. It's going to be off the page. That's okay. And I can go ahead and then collapse that frame down because I don't need it to be hanging off the page that much. Okay, so it's a guy, a faceless guy, and he's standing on kind of a dirty white background, and that's a cool image. But if I wanted to use that image, let's make it a little smaller, and let's say that I wanted to move that image down here and have text wrap around it, well, the text would have to wrap around the shape of the rectangle, unless I did it manually and tried to wrap it around him. And then even if I did it manually, the actual, white sandy background would still be behind him. So that's why I prefer to bring it in transparent, just him. That way I wouldn't have to worry about the background. I'd be able to automatically have the text wrap around him, so forth and so on. So let's get rid of this. Let's delete it. Now let me show you the way I would normally do this if that's the desired result. If I just want to bring the photo in, done, bring the JPEG in, problem solved. But if I want to bring it in without its background and have transparency, that's where Photoshop comes in. So I'm going to pop over to Photoshop. I've already got one image open here. I'm going to go ahead and close. I got two images open. I'm going to close that one. We're going to use this one too in a minute. But let's go back and get that same guy that we just saw out of my library. I love CC libraries because they work in all the applications. And whatever I put in the library, I can access from the other application. So we were looking at this photo in InDesign. Now we're going to double click on it and open it up in Photoshop. Okay, so I want to cut him out of the background. Well, this will be easier than usual because there's no hair to deal with. Hair makes it a little more challenging. Also, it's a little easier to deal with because the background, although he's wearing a white t-shirt, is still contrasted enough against the white background because the white background isn't solid white that it shouldn't take too much effort to cut it out. Now, it's not going to be a simple click because white shirt on a white background, brown skin on a brown background, black jeans on a black background. Those would all be difficult to do because there's no contrast. There's nothing separating it. But in this case, I will go to my quick select. I will grab select subject, which is a button at the very top of the screen here. I love select subject. That will at least narrow the subject down to what Photoshop thinks it is. And it did a pretty good job on the outline. Not perfect, but pretty good. Where it didn't do so well is under the arms, where I don't want the wall selected under his arms. I don't want to keep that. So I'm in the quick select tool already. And I want to subtract this from the selection. So I would hold down my Option or Alt key and click, and it subtracts that from the selection. Also, there's a little bit of jean edge here that was kind of, again, no contrast. It looks just like the wall. So I'm going to have to just add that in. Now, same thing here, Option or Alt click, Option or Alt click. And down here at the very bottom, Option or Alt click. And we're just going to go ahead and add some of that back in, add some of that back in, and we're in pretty good shape now. Add some more of the shirt back. Oop, I'm holding down the Option key. Don't want to hold down the Option key in this case. Just adding back in a little bit of the few pieces that I want to add back in or take out. Okay, so now I've got a much better selection. Select subject gotten 80% of it, 90% of it for me, and I just tweaked the little pieces that it didn't do right for me. And I could probably go in a little bit closer there and get that as well. Okay, so now that I got my subject selected, next thing we'll do is we'll go to the very next button next to select and subject, which is, or select subject, which is select and mask. So let's go ahead and click select and mask. That will go ahead and cut it out. That gave me a transparent background because I usually work on layers. So this will default to whatever it defaults to. It could be on black, it could be on white, it could be on showing you the silhouette, but I like it on layer so I can see what I missed. I can see what didn't get cut out. So this did a pretty good job. I don't really need to do any more adjusting here. I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. Oh, before you click OK, make sure that you're outputting it to a new layer with a mask, because if you just leave the default, it will just make a selection. All right, so now I got my new layer with a mask. So I have the new layer, the old layer. So now this is technically a layered file. When you use select and mask and you output a new layer with a mask, it creates a new layer. So we have two layers in this file now, or a background and a layer. So now I'm going to save this as a new file because the original was a JPEG. I can't just save it back as a JPEG because that will flatten it and put a white background back on. That's not what I want. So we're just going to save this out as a PSD, and it automatically makes it a PSD because you have layers. It could be a layered TIFF or a layered PSD, but we're going to keep it a layered PSD, and we're going to save it into my InDesign demo folder. All right, we'll save it there. All right. Now I got that saved. I can close it now. And I can go back to InDesign, and I can either draw a frame first, or I can go ahead and just place it, and it will make a frame for me. So let's go to the File menu, choose Place. Let's go to that same young man wearing a t-shirt, PSD, so that's going to be our layered file. And now it brings it in. Believe it or not, in the old days, you would have to use what's called a clipping path. You'd have to take the pen tool and draw a path around your subject, save it as a special way with a clipping path, and bring that in to work with transparency. Now with Photoshop and Illustrator, you just work with transparency, and InDesign knows what to do. It's known what to do since day one, pretty much. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and make them a little smaller so that his head, actually we'll make him still a little smaller. I want his head to come to the top of that paragraph. All right, so now that we got that, the next thing I would do, just for kicks, we'll go ahead and bring up text wrap. Let's go to text wrap, and while he's selected, we will simply say that we want to do a text wrap around the object shape. And you say, well, Terry, you still got a rectangle. What's up with that? Because there's one more thing to do. Text wrap around the shape and detect edges or use alpha channel. Either one of these should work. Detect edges says, oh, I'm going to figure out what the edges are, or you could say use alpha channel, and alpha channel would just preserve the transparency. So there we go. We've got now a text wrap. Doesn't look too good on justified text here, so I might go ahead and adjust this text to be left justified instead of fully justified. That would look better. But there it is. Now the text is wrapping around him and in the shape of the transparency. Even if I move him around, the text continues to wrap accordingly. So reason number one to use a layered, yes, the dark times of using clipping paths. Reason number one to use a transparency or use a Photoshop layered file is because of transparency. That's number one. Number two, you have a client, art director, boss, person who's always changing their mind. They're not done yet. In other words, you're still working on the image. So let's go back to Photoshop one more time. Here I've got just a simple background. And I could bring this in as a JPEG or as a TIFF, flat, no problem. But if my client or customer is still making changes or suggesting changes to the image, or I'm still making changes to the image, then that's where a PSD comes in. So for example, I think I've already saved this as a PSD. I think so. Yes, I did. Pluralist slide to fashion.psd. Okay, so it's already a PSD. So what might I want to do with this? Well, I might want to keep the original. That way I'll always have that to go back to. I might duplicate the layer, which we'll do. And then on the duplicate, I'll turn off the original. On the duplicate, I might want to fill in this hole. In other words, this is just a hole in the platform she's standing on, and I might want to have the planks come all the way down. So there's a few ways to do that. I'm not going to spend a ton of time perfecting this. I've used content-aware fill on this. I've used content-aware patch on this. I'm not going to make it perfect, but I'm just going to give you an idea. So using the patch tool, and we can either use normal or content-aware. We're just going to go ahead and patch this in like so, and then fill that in. All right, so the coloring, that line's missing. Coloring's off a little bit between that. So I would have to massage this. I didn't get it lined up just right. I would have to fix all that. But just for the sake of example, we've done that. All right, so now we save it. And then we go back to InDesign and we place it. Let's get rid of this for now. And let's say we want to place it into this area. So file place or drag and drop if you knew exactly where it was. File place, Command D, and there it is. All right, so we'll bring it in, the layered PSD file, and of course it shows just the way it showed inside of Photoshop. So now it shows with the layer 2 on top. Then my client says, and by the way, let's say you closed it as well. Then my client says, let's get rid of this, let's make it bigger. My client says, oh, I don't like the paint or bird poop or whatever that is on the walls. Can you get rid of that? So this is that back and forth I'm talking about. because they only see one change at a time. You make that change, then you show it to them, and they see another change they would love making. All right, so here's where working with a PSD also comes in handy. I quit Photoshop, close the file, and I'm just in InDesign, and the client says make a change, and I want to go back now and work with the layers. You can edit original in InDesign with an Option on the Mac or Alt on Windows, double click. So if I Option or Alt double click, that tells it to go open Photoshop or Illustrator, if it was Illustrator, open that file, and you can begin editing. So the minute I go ahead and make any changes, let's go ahead and use the healing brush. We'll make it smaller, and we'll just heal these out of here. Things that you would not be able to do inside of InDesign. That's why we have Photoshop. And we go ahead and make those changes. We simply hit save, because all you're doing is saving a change. Head back to InDesign. InDesign is already updated because it's linked to the PSD file. So for making changes to your files, this is where InDesign can, or working with a PSD can make a lot of difference. So now you show this to your client and say, oh, you know, I don't really like the orange wall. Can the orange wall be a different color? Yeah, there we go. So once again, Option, double click. We head back to the original file. We add a hue and saturation adjustment layer to it. I can see around my microphone here. There we go, hue and saturation. And we go in and target this, and we adjust the hue. We change it to a different color. So I don't know. Of course, they didn't specify a color. Ooh, I don't want to target her either. I'm going to have to mask her out. But we, she looks kind of alien now. She looks kind of cool. Let's say that they want it more in the yellow tones, and we can tighten the range up of colors that we're working with there. Okay, and then of course we don't want her to have that color, so we just add a quick mask using our paintbrush. And black paint, we just mask her face out so her face doesn't change. Okay, so now that we've done that, save, we've added a new adjustment layer to it. We switch back to InDesign. InDesign now has the yellow wall, and you just keep going. Same thing with this guy. If they decide this guy should have something different, whatever, Option double click, you're opening that native file, you're making whatever changes to that native file you want as well. So working with native files, Paul's asking, am I going to show you how to import Illustrator files? Replace everything I did with the word Illustrator. So file, place an Illustrator file. Be exactly the same. There would be no difference. Except for its vector. When you Option double click on it, it would open up an Illustrator. So everything I just showed you, Paul, would work exactly the same for Illustrator. So no, I'm not going to really show it as an example, but it would be identical. All right, so with that said, that is how and why you would work with Rowena, if I'm saying that correctly, is saying, oh my God, this will be awesome and save so much time. Yes, that's the point. Saves time because you're working with the native files and you're doing things to photos that InDesign can't do. That's why you're working with Photoshop in the first place. If you were just applying an effect, then that effect would... typically, you could just get away with doing it inside of InDesign. If I just wanted to add text to this photo, well, I don't need Photoshop for that. I can put text on top of a photo in InDesign. So you divide the responsibilities up between the applications where it makes sense. I do things in Photoshop that InDesign can't do or Illustrator can't do. I do things in Illustrator because InDesign can't do them, so forth and so on. So it really depends on what you're going to do. Now, let's say one last thing, and this would be my personal thing that's bothering me about this photo. I think her jacket is the jacket's fine, but the picture of the jacket is too dark. Like it's just like a black silhouette. I don't really see much detail in the jacket. So if it were me, and it is, I'm going to go to my filter menu, camera raw filter, and actually I would convert this for smart filter so I don't wreck it. Camera raw filter, and that brings up the camera raw filter on the other monitor. There we are. And I would probably bump up the shadows a bit so that we can bring out some more. Oh, look at that. See, you had no idea that there were folds in that coat she's wearing. Now you bring up the shadows. Oh, and this would be important for the fashion designer. If you were showing this as a fashion design magazine, they would definitely want to see the detail in your garment. So don't let the dark photo ruin your work. We click OK. It adds that adjustment as a smart filter. Now I've adjusted the jacket to be brighter. And now we save that, close it, come back, and InDesign. It's showing me I have an updated link. There we go. We update the link and done. So this is why we work with Photoshop layered files inside of InDesign. When you're making changes for yourself or for someone else, it definitely makes a difference. And when you want to work with photos with transparency, it absolutely makes a difference. Yes. All right, hang on. I see another question here. I just want to make sure it got answered properly. Oh, so that's a good question. So who's asking it? Eli's asking how to make more distance between the text and the photo. Like, for example, the word duo down here in the corner is touching him. And if I wanted more space, and the answer that was given in the thread was correct, you would just use the same text wrap panel. And right now you notice that the bounding box or boundary is 0. You would just increase that amount. So it basically tells it to move the text away from whatever it is that you're wrapping text around. And you can control the amount. You could even get in, if you want to be picky, you can even go in with the pen tool. Oh. First, I got to select it with the direct selection tool. There we go. And you actually even get a path that you can edit with the pen tool. So if there was a word like just squinched in somewhere and I didn't want that word to come in that far, I could actually use my direct selection tool and move this path around or adjust this path so that I am literally controlling exactly how the text goes around the object in specific spots. But if it's just overall spacing, yes, use the text wrap panel to do that. Okay, so I've given you more than you bargained for, more than I bargained for with this. And that's it. Cheers, everybody. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you on the next one. If you're in the Detroit area this week, I will be headed to the Rock That Photography Conference. Just go to rockthatconference.com and check it out. I'll be there starting Thursday, I think. So no more streams this week, but I will be live and in person if you're in the Detroit area. So with that said, cheers everyone. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you on the next one. Bye, everybody.